Hello, people. Good afternoon. It's usually a good morning from me, and I got my morning coffee, but I've had several morning coffees, and I've got my Ragdoll shirt on because I've got one to um, to pay respects to my guest, Mr. Leon Todd. Hey, Leon.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's a
Mate,
pleasure to be on.
As we were saying before, it's about time we actually got to have a bit of a chat. I know we've seen each other's work for a little while. How's things in Perth?
It thankfully over the last 2 days has been cooler. We had this very, very intense heat wave, which has coincided with me having to basically play in a giant tin shed over the last month of playing a show. So yeah, it's been sticky. It's been a pretty brutal summer so far, but man, the last couple of days have just reminded me that we don't actually live on the surface of the sun all the time here. You can go outside and get some fresh air and things. So that's been a nice relief.
Cool. Hey, what's the show you're playing? I've seen you've been doing something.
Yeah, so the show's called Club Cabaret. It's Bernie Dita's Club Cabaret, it's like a circus cabaret. I don't know. It's like I'd describe it as if you're familiar with Cirque du Soleil, that
Yep.
kind of thing. It's a live band. It's circus performers and freaks and weirdos and all that kind of thing happening live. So it's like a 2 hour show, and yeah, it's so fun for me. I get to stretch like all the different musical muscles that I wouldn't normally do in a typical rock band setting. There's stuff that we're playing which is caked in like tremolo and spring reverb and very sort of sultry, almost jazz stuff, and then full on playing as fast as I can while people are swallowing swords and setting things on fire. So yeah,
That sounds awesome.
It's a great show. It really is. Yeah, I've been doing it for about the past year. So I've done live element of it. It's what I enjoy, and I know a lot of people who have come and seen the show said they really appreciate where there's a lot of audience interaction. So to like get up and play the songs, but you're also watching the show and trying to react to what's happening. And I definitely have a newfound appreciation for all the weird cartoonish noises you can get an electric guitar to make, because I've had to use a lot of them recently.
Cool. And were you doing that over in Sydney recently? Is that the same show that I saw you doing?
Yeah, so I kind of jumped on board with them. They'd been looking for a guitar player for a while. They had a few guys the last time they did. So it's Fringe at the moment, Fringe Festival in Perth, which is normally I think 5 or 6 weeks during summer every year.
Yep.
So they had a couple of local guys sort of filling in for them last year, and I jumped on for the last few shows. Then I went and did Auckland Arts Festival with them in March last year. That was for 3 weeks, and then did 9 weeks with them in Sydney at the entertainment quarter there in Sydney, which was pretty full on. Then I went and did 6 shows with them in Europe as well at a really big music festival. So yeah,
That's awesome.
It's been an induction into that whole world, which is an interesting like parallel branch to the sort of music industry I'm sure we're very familiar with, where you're not only just expected to sort of show up and play and do your job, but there's the theatricality of it, and there's also seeing all the behind the scenes stuff that goes into what these like amazing performers do. I was saying to somebody how it's it's made me reevaluate. I'm not a huge word of that word like talent, and someone's like, oh, they're very talented. A lot of the time it's used, especially like in Australia, right, as like offhand for like, oh, well, you got lucky and figured out you were good at something and you just milk. It's like, no, it's, how someone can find that they're really good at, say, I don't know, like hand balancing, and then figure out all the different ways you can do that. It's sort of like, if you figure out your like rock guitar,
Yep.
and you're explaining that to someone, but you're explaining the very specific type of rock guitar you like, and they just sort of go like, how would you, okay. So it's really fun as someone, like probably all of us listening at the moment, where you like really, really burrow into the good stuff and the weird niches with music and guitar, but realizing that exists for like everything out there, and that getting able to sit back and watch like, really great performers every night do their thing and kind of pick up little tricks of, how they work a crowd, or how they prepare, or how they, how they're able to pack much stuff into a small space. It's like I have a couple of pedals and a guitar, and I stress about it. But there's people traveling with, you know, multiple aerial apparatus and things like that. And you're like, you fit all this into like a standard suitcase, and I was like, show me your secrets. So in that respect as well.
Yeah. Hey, Leon, I'm just going to give you the heads up. I am getting the odd little glitch with the internet connection. That's the joy of doing things live and taking a punt that the internet's working today. So if you hear me sort of start talking over you and saying, "Oh, we've lost him," I'm just giving you the heads up. It's been pretty good. There's been a couple of times it's glitched there. So if I do say to you, "I'll miss that last 10 seconds" or something, mate, I usually start these off by finding out a little bit about how people got started in this crazy world of guitar. So what sparked the fire for music for you, mate? And I've lost you. I've just got a smiling Leon. Hopefully he comes back.
Well, there you go. Right on cue.
Right on cue. I can hear you again. I'll try changing camera. At least it stopped on a smile for you. There, you're back. We're good. Oh, he's gone. I'll just keep talking because he just phoned back in. And he's back.
And right on cue. It
was right on cue, man. That was classic.
So yeah, I'm going to cross all my fingers and toes that doesn't happen again. But yeah, let's just.
I'm glad I gave you the heads up when I did then, just in case it happened. But if that happens, man, just log back in and we'll be good.
Great.
So, in case you missed it the first time, what sparked the fire for music for you, bro?
So I mean, my dad plays guitar, so I kind of grew up in a family where that was just something that was around all the time. The natural reaction being like a preteen Aussie kid is that, well, music, why would you want to do that when you can play sport, or you can play, you can go skateboarding or play video games.
Yeah.
But, I was born in 1988, so I like really caught the crest of that wave with like the first amazing gaming consoles. So yeah, I think that was probably hard to process for my parents, where it's like spending so much time dedicated to something that has, no real world application. And then kind of, maybe when I was about 13 or 14, I was really into skateboarding because I used to play like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, right? Like so many people my age, it was a way to, get out and hang out with your mates and not have to do like an organized sport or something like that. And through that, I got into a lot of music, buying the VHS video magazines that would come out, and just kind of really being into all the stuff that was on there, which of course was a lot of like punk rock, a lot of rock, a lot of one thing about a lot of those skate videos, you might hear like, I mean, for example, I remember I had one video where one of the songs was Ozzy Osbourne, I Don't Know, but the live version, where he comes out, and just hearing that and being like, whoa, what on earth? Like not really being into guitar, but just knowing it was great guitar playing, or hearing Iron Maiden, or hearing, like there was a bunch of like early, like hearing Dead Kennedys or the Ramones or something like that. Just being like, I didn't know you were allowed to sing songs like this about just really stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that was kind of the backdoor way into music for me. And then I had a friend who played a little bit of guitar, and we'd sort of muck around with it. I remember getting that like, hang on, this is kind of cool. I should like spend some more time on this. And my younger sister who's 2 years younger than me, was like doing, a guitar ensemble or something. I remember she had some like sheet music for Stairway to Heaven. And I was like, hey, am I doing this right? Like, you put your finger on the fret and the number, and she was like, yeah. And so I kind of like stole her guitar. And then I think pretty quickly, like my parents figured out that I was sort of into it. So I have a lot of fond memories of my dad kind of like being like, oh, if you like that, listen to, you like Iron Maiden, listen to Black Sabbath. You like Black Sabbath, listen to Deep Purple. So I got, and this is, we're talking like 2001, 2002. So, you know, a CD in Australia was like minimum $30. So if you're a 13 or 14-year-old kid, you're not buying heaps of those
Mm.
every week. And like the whole illegal downloading thing was happening, but my family had only just got a computer and we had dial-up internet. So it took you like 2 days to download a song.
Yeah.
So having a dad with like an awesome CD collection was like a massive, massive advantage, where it's like I could just hear all this stuff that had awesome guitar playing that I didn't realize not all of my friends had access to.
Cool. So, what was your first guitar you got?
So the first distinct one I remember having, it was a Hondo copy of an Erlewine Laser. So it's like a headless travel guitar.
Really?
And if anyone's familiar, there's a Johnny Winter album where he's playing an Erlewine Laser. It looks kind of like a Steinberger. And I distinctly remember having a mate come over and him being like, "Oh, you play guitar, show us something," and pulling this thing out and him just being like, "That's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Like, that's not a guitar." And me being like, "No, look, it's got this and it's got a coil tap." And probably still at my parents' place. Like, I'll have to pull it out and do a video with it. But yeah, it was sort of, so obviously Dan Erlewine, who a lot of people probably know as like the guitar repair guru. I think it was one of his designs. And yeah, you'd look at it and just say, yeah, it looks like a weird Steinberger, but it had a cool thing where you could sit it on your lap and the guitar would be at like a good angle, for playing. So yeah, that's what I learned to play guitar on. I had that and a Zoom 707, the one with the expression pedal, and a set of headphones. And that was, you just go through like the presets and there'd be something that said like Van Halen and you'd be like, what's a Van Halen? It's got like a flanger and distortion. Like, this is cool. And I remember not long after that, my uncle, who's a bass player, coming over and like babysitting us. I was probably like 13 or 14 and, just like hanging out. And he was always the cool uncle who, he played in bands a lot longer than my dad did. And I mean, my dad's cool, but my dad's my dad as well. You never think that as a teenager. And I really distinctly remember him being like, "Oh, you got a guitar. Cool. Like, what are you playing through?" Show me like some of the sounds in this Zoom and getting to Van Halen and him playing Unchained.
Cool.
And just being like, "Uncle Tony, what was that?" And he goes, "Oh, 1 second, I'll go to my car." And he had Fair Warning on CD. He goes, "Yeah, listen to this. Like, you've never heard Van Halen before." And yeah, that was like, amazing. And then also, just having stuff that could make you could get at the time, the idea that you could have like a really cool clean sound and a really cool distorted sound, but then like, all the Zoom effects always had weird like stepped phases and like sequencer style stuff.
Yep.
And there's something in there where I was like, "Oh, this sounds like," and Aussies will totally get this. It's like, this sounds like Savage Garden. Like that's cool. Like that. So it was cool having, the ability to get, what I thought sounded like classic rock recordings, but then also like all the kind of modern style effects out of it. So yeah, that was sort of the rig for a while. And I mean, those crazy effects are probably the reason I stuck with guitar, because you didn't have to play well. You could just hit a note and it'd do everything you wanted it to.
Cool. And did you start getting some lessons eventually, or did you just keep teaching yourself? Did you hear that? Have I lost you? You still there, mate? I think I've lost you. No, we got a frozen. Oh, hey, he's back. So I'm not sure if you heard me. Can you hear me now, Leon? No. He's going to call back in. This is what happens when we do it live. And boom, he's back. Sorry, mate.
Oh, good. How much of that did you actually get before?
I asked you a question and then it froze, but it froze with you just looking at the camera. And I'm thinking, hang on, he's thinking really hard about this. I think I asked you whether you started getting lessons around that point or whether you kept with the self-teaching route. And it just looked like you were just looking at me. I'm like, hello, can you hear me?
What's lesson? No, I was, again, fortunate having a dad who plays guitar, and he also taught guitar. So what I would do would just kind of like hang around, you know, while he was teaching, to look at what he was showing people, and then like scurry back and do that. A lot of it, I mean, my recollection of it probably isn't very accurate. You always look back and you're like, yeah, no, I was super self-motivated. I did all this kind of stuff. It was nice always having someone you could ask a question. Like if I had a magazine with some tab in it that I didn't understand, I'd be like, what does this symbol mean? Or like, hey, why do they keep saying like ACE 135? Like, what are these things? And, him sort of being like, they're intervals, go and figure out what it means.
Yep.
So it's kind of cool having that, and, just having someone you could always bug where it's just like, hey, want to jam? Like, can you show me that song that you always play? And yeah, I know for me, like just having those resources. He also had like every guitar player magazine going back to like 1981 in like mint condition. So when I discovered that, and I've read all of them.
Yep.
Like I'd sit there and just go through them in every interview, and you read about, you'd be reading some article. It's like, oh, cool. There's a thing with Yngwie Malmsteen, but like, who's Al Di Meola? I've got to check this guy out now. So
Sure.
yeah, sort of pre-internet, almost like having a little internet before the internet was super fleshed out.
Yep.
So yeah, I got really lucky in that regard. But I do remember like my little Zoom thing had a tuner on it. And I'd sit there, one day I was like, oh, I wonder what all the notes are on the guitar. Like hitting the open E and then the first fret, and then going like, oh, cool. There's only so many notes, like little moments. I really cherish those moments where you feel like you discover something yourself. But also at the same time, yeah, I was like super privileged to have access to all those resources and, great guitars and all the other stuff.
Awesome. William De Silva wants to know what the first song you learnt was.
Ooh, very, very good question. Honestly, probably like a one-finger version of the intro of Stairway to Heaven, or what's the song? Oh, that old surf rock song, Pipeline. It was one of those two.
Sure.
Yep. Just learning surf tunes was like, such a thing. I feel like I still do it. I still teach a lot of my students like, hey, if you're starting out, like go and grab a bunch of like Ventures and, stuff like that from the 60s where it's all single note guitar melodies.
Yeah.
Shadows. You can play it with
Shadows
one finger.
and surf guitar. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the starting point.
Exactly. I always say Hank Marvin is maybe the most overlooked influential guitar player, where you could sort of maybe argue that he's had an even bigger impact than, like, my hot take would be like he's more important to the development of electric guitar than Hendrix, because that entire generation, like that British blues boom generation, Jeff Beck, Peter Frampton, Jimmy Page, they all wanted to play electric guitar because of Hank. Like he was the OG cool guitar player playing guitar melodies with all these like crazy sounding effects. He had the first Strat in the UK. It's like he's such an important person in that evolution. And also, you'd know it, right? You speak to players of a certain generation, they're like, Shadows, you just learnt Shadows songs, and if you progress past that, then you might learn some chords and you might like get into your sort of blues rock and things like that. So it was probably yes, bit of Jimmy Page or Pipeline.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny. Most of my guitar hero was Hank Marvin.
Yes.
And when I'm teaching kids as well, the first few months, like you say, some surf guitar tunes, some Hank Marvin. Now, Hank lives in Perth and you're in Perth.
He does, yeah.
Have you crossed paths with him? Have you met him?
Not directly. I've done there was a small guitar festival here where I was doing a workshop at the same time he was doing a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
But the coolest story is that my dad made his son Ben a guitar.
Cool.
In the early 90s, yeah. So through a mutual, like a friend of my dad's who's good friends with Hank, sort of introduced him to him and was sort of like, yeah, like so he got to meet him. He got to play the Strat, and like kind of measured the neck and a few other things. And I think built him a guitar or built him a neck. And there was that like guitar thing in Barcelona in the early 90s with like, everyone who was everyone, like Brian May. And there's a thing where you see, I think Ben's jamming with Hank or something like that. And yeah, I don't know the story that well. I'd love to meet him one day and see if he remembers it. But
Yeah.
yeah, he does a gypsy jazz thing now in Perth.
Awesome. Awesome. I've just started trying to learn a bit of Django style gypsy jazz myself, actually, just with, as I was telling you off air, I've been going to university the last couple of years and actually learning a little bit about music. And there's this assumption that, oh, you've got some knowledge now, you must play jazz. I don't give a fuck about jazz, but that gypsy jazz shit with the dude with the two fingers, I'm all over that. Show me that. So I love it. You hearing me, bro? No, he's dropped out again. That's okay. He will drop. He will come back in. And he's back.
Question at a time, and I'll just keep logging in. My apologies. It's definitely the local internet here. So what was I saying, Hank Marvin? Yeah, you will run into him around town. Yeah, and he does a gypsy jazz kind of thing now.
Sure. And I just had a little rant about how, with my newfound knowledge from uni, that I've started getting into a bit of gypsy jazz myself rather than just the standard jazz that everybody tries to push you into. Yeah. Hey, at what age were you good enough to start in a band and start playing gigs?
So I think I did my first gig, like gig in a pub, I think when I was maybe 19.
Okay.
But I had been teaching guitar since I was about 15. So I feel like I progressed pretty quickly on the guitar, from about being 13, 14 and like, cool, this is something that I'd want to do. And like a lot of things I tend to do, get very obsessive very quickly. And there was a couple of kids, like younger kids down the road who, I'd show them some surf rock songs or some Shadows tunes and stuff and make a little bit of money that way. And then when I was 16, I went to a new high school that catered only to like year 11 and year 12. It was sort of like a new concept that they were doing in WA, where it was basically a state-run school, but it was an independent school.
Cool.
So they had a really good music program. They had a really the music teacher was like, she was in her early 20s, super talented, super motivated. They had a lot of we had like a computer and an audio interface and like stuff like Reason and Cakewalk that we could record on.
Wow.
So basically our music project for the whole year was to record a song, like write, record, produce a song. So that was super cool. And through that, we do like performances in front of our class. And then, yeah, I really got the bug big time because I think maybe at the end of my first year there, we did a big performance for like all the parents and all the students, like an after school arts night thing. And I just had so much fun playing live. I was like, oh my God, this is like better than I could imagine,
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was probably 15 or 16. I've got footage somewhere. I feel like I might have shared a little bit of it on the YouTube channel a while ago, where I think when I'm 17, playing one of these school concerts, because they filmed it all, So like the media students set up a multicam thing, and it was a really cool environment to be in, because sort of like everyone who was, if you were doing anything arts related, you were invested and involved in this like school production. And yeah, watching it, I don't think I was quite, I could play some impressive stuff and I could play guitar, like I could play a few things fast, but there's definitely like some very basic musical things that were not fully developed. So yeah, having said that, once I started gigging, all those things kind of tend to take care of themselves, or you're just in an environment where it's like, hey, yeah, you have to start and stop at the same time as everybody else, and like not speed up or slow down, and real basic stuff, that you realize you don't have a great handle on until you have to do it consistently. So yeah, I've pretty much been gigging regularly since then, which makes it like 16 or 17 years this year. So
wow.
Yeah, it still seems like yesterday I did my first gig, and it was so exciting, and I showed up with like a rack and all these guitars, and it was so overblown. But yeah, and I'd been at that stage, I had met some friends through uni, and we'd jam every Sunday, and they were like really great guys to play with, because they were, not only were they into all the same music I liked, they could actually play it, where I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to the point where I can play it. So yeah, and people familiar with my channel and the podcast I do, Troy Nababan, that was him that I met. And then Ragdoll's drummer, Cam, I met those guys in 2005, 2006, I think.
Wow.
And yeah, we'd like just on Sundays hang out and jam. And I still remember the first jam I had with him where like Cam's got 6 rack toms on his drum kit and, a double pedal and like all these cymbals. And it was like, oh my God, I actually distinctly remember having a jam with him and being like, man, I'm actually not good enough to play with these guys. Like, I'm sure they won't ask me to come back.
Yeah.
And I'm still mates with all of them now. So yeah, that was a really cool experience as well. And then, yeah, obviously going from jamming in a bedroom to performing your own music, it all felt like it took a long time, but looking back, I think it happened fairly quickly.
Yeah. So you started doing the original thing pretty early, writing originals?
Yeah. And that was just something for me as well. All the artists that I like, always talked about how writing was the most important thing. And yeah, being able once a week to go in with my mates and like, cool, we're going to like try and write a new song. And, it'd be like a 6-note riff and a bunch of power chords, but
yeah,
it's kind of fun.
But that's how you find your own voice, isn't it? Like, you can't play in a cover band forever and just be a parrot.
I mean, you can. Plenty of people do, and I think the thing for me is I've realized it's like, yeah, some people actually thrive in that environment. It's weird how if you've got that bug of like, I want to make my own stuff, and you're really invested in your art, then that process can be really sapping and really draining, as I'm sure you probably know, where you're like, oh, I'd love to just go out and do a gig of my own stuff. But I know lots of people who, being able to go out and play a set of covers would be like the high watermark in their musical career.
Yeah, right.
That's something that a lot of people work towards. So I think with time, I've really come to appreciate that, where it's like, okay, cool. Actually, the important thing is your attitude to what you're doing. But sometimes being in that environment where, yeah, doing the covers thing grinds you down a bit can be good, because it will push you to pursue, it gives you that like, all right, if I'm not fully enjoying this, I have to try the original music thing. Otherwise, I'm going to die wondering and not be satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was kind of lucky. I started playing, the guys I started playing with in my first band when I was like 14 were all really good guys, all happened to go to high school together. And we started writing the originals pretty early, but filling out the mostly covers at first, the odd original, and then until it got to the point where it was mostly originals and a few little covers.
Yeah, that's
there.
awesome.
Yeah. Ragdoll, how long? You said they've been together for quite a while, huh?
Yeah, so like I said, I met our drummer Cam around like 2005, 2006. It turns out we went to uni together. We were both doing like science degrees.
Yep.
And, there was only a handful of, be a different thing now because the mullet is back in vogue. But, when at that time, if you saw another guy your age with long hair, you were probably like, you're probably a muso, like, you're like destined to meet. So yeah, probably around 2008, 2009, we met now our singer bass player Ryan, and he was doing the covers thing. And at the time, we were like 20, 21, and he's 5 years older than me. And, kind of had his life somewhat together, was married, had a house, was about to have a kid. We were kind of like, yeah, this isn't going to work because, like, how are we going to go on tour with like someone who's, like got a life? You have to be a deadbeat loser to be in a band. And, as these things kind of tend to work themselves out, anytime we'd go see him play, it would be like, oh my God, this guy's so amazing. Like, his voice is just incredible. And at the time, we were basically we all got together in a jam room. And at the time we had another friend of ours playing bass, really, really talented muso, like classical double bass player, great rock bass player as well. And then Ryan was playing with another guy in like an 80s cover band. So it's the 5 of us got together with our buddy Luke, who was sort of like the designated singer frontman. And, we were all really into like Def Leppard and Scorpions and that. So the idea was we were going to do this really retro throwback 80s be original music.
Cool.
And
I've just seen one of the comments here. Who can understand these accents? I didn't think of that. And I thought he might drop out again. So in the meantime, who can understand these accents? Who can understand these accents?
yeah, I think we're breaking the internet with the Aussiness. So where was I? Yeah, so we were like jamming and doing some stuff as a 5-piece, and eventually the bass player moved on. And so at this time, Ryan, our singer, was playing guitar and singing some backing vocals. He wasn't that interested in being the main guy. It was just like, we all had this thing of like, yeah, we like 5-piece bands. And then our bass player left, and Ryan was kind of like, cool, I'll play bass. He gigged a lot playing bass. And then, yeah, it was sort of I think like musically, the three of us just gelled really, really well. And it was one of those things as well where, we'd go out and do regional gigs where we'd, do a little bit of our original music, but we'd mostly go and play a night of covers, and that was a good way to earn some money for the band. So we could afford to go and record our stuff and hopefully one day go on tour. And yeah, sort of anytime Ryan would take over and sing a song, everyone would just be like, oh my God, man, like this guy's voice, it's
cool.
It's amazing. So yeah, sort of after maybe like 18 months of doing that, we just decided, let's just make this a 3-piece. See, it's cheaper and easier to do it with 3 guys, and
less personalities to deal with as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of, and I think there really is something to be said as well, playing in a rock band with a singer who also plays an instrument, especially if they're playing bass, because they're doing this dual thing where because they're singing, then they have to play stuff that they can also play while they're singing. So it's going to make the sort of bass parts tighter, but also because they're having a lock with the drummer, it's going to make all the singing super tight. So yeah, and Ryan's just one of those guys where I think if you ask him how he does what he does, he probably couldn't explain it to you. He's just always, that was like he's always just played an instrument and sang as well. It's like the two just go hand in hand. So he's got a lifetime of practicing that, rather than like, a guitar player learning to sing where you're like, okay, cool, I have to, delegate these tasks and do stuff like that. So yeah, I think the first gig we did as a 3-piece was in 2011.
Yep.
And we recorded basically a demo that we like repackaged and remixed as a 4-track EP, and a friend of a friend passed it on to someone who was booking like a side stage festival in the States. And yeah, at the start of 2012, we got like invited to go and play this massive music festival in Oklahoma called Rocklahoma.
Wow.
And that was the impetus to get our stuff together. I think we recorded another 5-track EP and went over there and did a little bit of touring and got the bug in a May, and sort of went back every year for the next 5 years.
Nice. Now, I'm hoping you're still with me. You froze for a bit. No,
yep.
You are still with me. So you've become very popular internationally as a YouTuber. Has that helped with the band profile?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nice thing. You do YouTube. I think being a YouTuber is now it's a job. It's like a career pathway. I speak to, my friends' kids, and they find out I have a YouTube channel, and they're all across it. They're like, how many subscribers do you have? What's your what's your retention rate on like your video? It's like, mate, I don't know what this stuff is most of the time. It's like they're really, because I guess it's like TV was for us.
Absolutely.
It's just, this is where you learn about the world and culture. And I fell into it very incidentally, where I bought some gear, some Fractal audio gear, to help make touring easier. And just for my own curiosity, I wanted to learn how it worked. And they've got a really good wiki.
Yep.
And so, really thorough manual. So I'd like learn things and sort of be like, oh, cool, I'm just going to like screen cap this and like leave a quick little description so that I can remember how to do it again.
Yep.
And yeah, my wife was kind of like, oh, you should upload these. Surely people would, be into them. So I started uploading them, and, they're like terrible. Like the guitars a million decibels and the voice is barely audible, but people watch them. That
Yep.
was the thing that I was like, oh, this is strange. Maybe I should actually like try with these kind of tutorials. And I've got a good friend here in Perth who'd be an interesting person to chat to on the podcast, running a pedal company called Anarchy Audio.
Cool.
And I distinctly remember him going, hey, I've got this new pedal out. I'll come around, I'll film everything and edit it, but I'll just get you to play through this pedal and tweak it. And then, upload it to YouTube on your own YouTube channel. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't know. Or at the time, all I knew was like Brett Kingman and Pete Thorne. They were like the only two people, and like Pro Guitar Shop. That was it. That's where you went to see a pedal demo. And I was like, yeah, but they're like legit dudes. And obviously I didn't realize that you could just kind of do it yourself. So he kind of encouraged me as well to, invest in the channel and the platform and things like that. So yeah, it's been cool. And being able to turn around and go, hey, also, I'm not just somebody sitting in my, like, I am a bedroom guitarist because I spend a lot of time in my bedroom just making noise, but being able to turn around and go, hey, if you're into this kind of stuff and you're into what I'm playing and you like music and you play some kind of value on it, then you can also check out the band. So yeah, it's been cool seeing the process, where it's probably been the last couple of years where, yeah, people will come to our shows because they're like, oh, I saw on your YouTube channel that you're playing a show, or, I bought the album a while ago and really like it. So yeah, that's definitely the upside to it.
Yep. Well, your profile's definitely through the roof. I mean, you opened for Malmsteen recently. I saw you at the Sunshine Coast Guitar Festival, all those kinds of things. And I'm guessing that's because of the profile that you've gotten through YouTube. Were you doing it for a while before people started to take notice?
I kind of started uploading regularly, I think, in about 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And the other hobby, because we're all obsessed with gear, was that when I was a lot younger, I kind of discovered, and like a lot of my favorite players, like I'd read old magazines. It's like, oh, Paul Gilbert plays an 80A MP1.
Yep.
And it's like, what's that?
And you dropped out.
Sorry, Matt, you dropped out for a second. Am I still there?
You're still back. You're back, yes.
Seeing stuff like that. And I distinctly remember my dad being like, oh, I used to own one of those. I think I sold it to your uncle. Like, and then buying it back off him. And then going on this kind of thing, like getting really obsessed with, why would I spend $200 on a Boss pedal when I can buy a Digitech multi-effects for like $60 secondhand? These were the good old days.
Yep.
I've ruined that market for everybody, and I apologize about that.
But it happens. Yeah. He's gone again. He will be back. I'm going to stay right here until he comes back in. There he is. At least we've got the workflow down.
Yeah, exactly. I know what to do now.
I talk a little bit and I look over there and plug you back in.
Yeah. So something that kind of, when I got into it, I was like, well, I want to teach myself how to do it. Mm-hmm. So I just literally made it my goal to demo every piece of gear that I own, like every amp, every piece of old weird rack gear. And it's almost like that was inadvertently like market research, because I do a video with a Marshall amp and all these people would come out of the woodwork and be like, yep, I've got that amp, try this. They're like enthusiasts. Or doing comparison videos, which is actually, funnily enough, how I came across your stuff originally, because it was like, 80A MP1 versus Marshall JMP1. I was like, oh, this guy's in Australia. This is cool. Oh, he's got a Hamer guitar. What's with that? Like, I didn't know anyone else owned these down here.
Right there.
Yep. So yeah, doing a lot of, I think the motivation was, I wanted to teach myself how to get better at doing it by using the stuff I already had. But the sort of flip side was, you get turned on to all these little kind of niche communities where it's like, people who like rack gear is a whole thing. People who love Boss pedals. I mean, we all love Boss pedals, but there's some people that really love Boss pedals,
Yep.
So kind of realizing that there's all these different people to interact with was really exciting for me. So it made me want to find more gear and demo more stuff. And I found I could probably even in real time tell you when now people probably call them like milestones, right? But it's like I
Yep.
remember ticking over like 3,000 subscribers and thinking that was insane.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was right at the start, probably about 7 years ago. So yeah, that was like January 2018, which
Wow.
was really cool.
Yep.
And there's that sort of positive feedback network that I don't know, like post-COVID YouTube is definitely a different thing, but that was still pre-COVID where it was like, yeah, you could just start a channel and talk about like anything you're super passionate about, and people would probably find it. And I didn't set out to be like, right, I'm going to do gear demos and make a living out of it. It was just like a fun way to learn something new, but also like I realized the thing that I really like about playing in a band and recording music was you get that satisfaction of like seeing an idea through. The frustrating thing about it, as we all know, is like it can take months and years to like finish a song.
Yep.
You rehearse it, you play it live, you workshop it, you rewrite it, you change it, you pay all this money to go into a recording studio, you get it mixed, you get it mastered, you do all the revisions, you schedule it for release. It comes out, no one listens to it. You go through the phase of never wanting to listen to it. About 3 years later, you're like, oh, that was actually a pretty cool idea. I'm glad I recorded that.
Yep.
What I found was if I could sit down and make a little YouTube video about a piece of gear or something, I ought to like scratch that same creative itch. But obviously it was far more, it could all happen a lot quicker. And I was really the only person to answer to with it. So it's like a different outlet for my creativity. Yeah. Which I still find, like, I still love making videos. It's my process has changed a lot.
Yeah. I was
So a
going to
lot of
ask
the
you
time
that
the
just about
motivation is still the
your
same.
workflow and how long it took you to find your way around and make it a comfortable thing. Because as I said to you off air when I first started doing it, it would take me all day just to set up the lights and everything. And then you look back, go, oh, fuck's sake, I'm out of focus. Or so yeah. Did it take a while to find your flow?
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife's fantastic photographer, and I was really lucky where she's got like a Canon, really nice Canon camera, and she was like, look, I'll help you set it up. This is what these things mean. Sit down on your chair, I'll set this shot up for you, and then just go. And then it was sort of like she bought me some lights, kind of go after bugging me like, you should invest in some lighting, you should get better lighting, your videos will look way better if you're lit better. And then got me some light, like one of which I still have, which is shining on me at the moment. So I feel like that was like a big, oh crap, my videos actually don't look like I'm playing in some like cave in Central Asia, on the run from the government. It's like you can see everything. And yeah, I mean, for now, like the camera that I use for all my things is this little Canon M50, which you can find these secondhand for like $500 now.
I'm looking at one right now. And there's another one right there that I swing out for my guitars. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got two of them as well. And literally one of them sort of have been busted for about the last 9 months. There's some auto sensor cleaning thing. There's a bug with it. And if that bug happens, you can't start the camera. So I just had it sitting in like a cupboard, and I pulled it out the other day, and I was like, I'll just check that the battery's still live. I'll see the bug. And then the camera started normally. And I was like, oh, I'm going to turn the auto sensor cleaning thing off. So that's the one bad thing about it. But now I fix that. So yeah.
Are they Mark 1 or Mark 2s?
This is I'm sure it should probably tell me somewhere. I think this is a Mark 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Both mine are Mark 1s. And do you record to the actual cards within them, or do you go out and record into an ISO recorder of some description?
Yeah. This is such a good example of like, once you find your workflow, how little you probably end up needing to learn about anything. I just record to the SD card and then pull it out and put it into my computer. But what are you using, like an ATEM or something like that?
No, I'm using the software that I'm streaming with right now.
Cool.
Actually allows me to record both my cameras or a guest. If I wanted to record this, I could do it. Only because, and I asked you if you were using Mark 1s or 2s, because the Mark 1 doesn't have a clean HDMI out. So you can't go to some of these other devices that are around. But Ecamm Live is the software I use if anyone's interested for streaming. But now that I'm back into doing demos, I'm recording my cameras direct into it. They're perfectly synced.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I was trying to get a way that it was recording my audio separately as well. That's a little bit glitchy, so I think I'm just going to go back to recording all my audio into a DAW as well.
Yeah, that's what I do. So I basically have my camera, and I just, rather than worrying about having a mic on it or a lapel or anything, I've got my SM7B and a universal audio interface, and I just record the vocal audio and the guitar audio on separate tracks.
Yep.
And then, I had been using Final Cut for a long time, but I switched over to I had that moment of like, right, I've got a few days free at like the start of the year a few years ago. I'm not doing anything else. I'm going to teach myself Resolve because it's free. And I'm just going to like relearn all the key commands that I need to edit. And my editing process is basically like drag, if I've got two camera angles, drag them both onto the timeline, drag the sort of mixed audio that I've recorded in my DAW underneath, and just hit like synchronize clips.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll do everything else manually, So I've just found that's easier. Like in the DAW, I always like when you're watching a video of like someone demoing an amp that, for example, when they play the guitar, you don't hear the ambient string noise in the room.
Yeah.
You just get the close mic. So
Yep.
I just go through in my DAW and cut out all of those bits that are on the vocal mic. I know you can use basically sidechain compressors and stuff like that, but it's just, I'm so used to that workflow where I can, if I've got 30 minutes of footage, it probably takes me another 5 to 7 minutes to just go through and manually scrub those bits.
Yeah, right.
And then check the levels and then export it.
I was wondering about that because I was going to try and set it up with the sidechain, so it would do it automatically. Because you're right, you don't want to hear that string noise. But mate, you're a really good talker to the camera as well. Do you script any of it? Do you use bullet points, or do you just freeform it? And he's gone again. This is where the point where I just keep talking until my computer goes ding-a-ling. There it is. And then I try and find my mouse, and I hit that button, and he's back.
I wish I could sidechain the process of my internet not dropping out.
That's okay, mate. That's okay. When I first started doing this, I had Jennifer Batten on, and she had her dog on her lap, and it decided to jump off mid-interview and took out her laptop. It hit the power cord and everything. And that was the first time I had something like that go down live, and I just thought,
wow.
Okay, hopefully she phones back in, and she did straight away. And I just thought, if that ever happens, I'll just keep talking and they'll be back in a few seconds.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, I was asking whether you script any of it, whether you use bullet points, or whether you just completely freeform it.
I'd say like 90% of the time it's completely freeform, which definitely makes sense when I go back and edit things where I'm like, man, I've said the same thing 6 times. I'm just going to have to clip. But yeah, a lot of my earlier videos, I didn't do any editing at all. I just start and do the whole video and leave it, and hope I didn't make mistakes. And then it was kind of like, oh, well, if I make a mistake, I can just put like a little clap in there so that I see it when I go back and edit it, and then cut that bit out. But yeah, most of the time it's kind of stream of consciousness. If I'm demoing a piece of gear, I'll spend some time with it. And, I feel like I have a pretty good process now for like, I'll read the manual, I'll go through and do it. And then it's kind of like, okay, cool. Like most gear demos, you want to focus on the strengths of something as well. So it's like, okay, cool. I want to get within that first 3 or 4 minutes, I want to get to the point where it sounds like, here's the cool thing. If it's like if you're demoing like a Soldano amp or something, you're like, cool, we got to get to that overdrive channel as quickly as possible because that's where all the fun's at. And once we've got that, then I'll go back and maybe get a bit more in depth. But if it is if it's sort of like a really specific tutorial or something, I might have some dot points just to remind myself what to get to. But I feel like for what I do most of the time, it's not like a 5 watt world thing where you're basically making a documentary every time you do a video where it should probably be fact checked and things like that. I
Yep.
think for most of what I do, it's even if I'm demoing stuff, I still want it to have that like tutorial kind of feel to it, where it's like, you know, if you go and buy this amp or pedal or guitar, you can come back and watch this and not have to read the manual. That's always sort of what I aim for.
Sure.
So yeah, trying to find that blend between being, you know, spontaneous and genuine, but also, you know, there's pieces of gear out there that are so complex and sophisticated that, yeah, I don't think any one person can just immediately unbox them and be like, cool, here's how all of it works.
Yeah. Yeah. There is an element of that, having to work it out for yourself. Do you shoot for a certain amount of videos a week? You think I'm going to do 3 this week, I'm going to do 5 or
I think up until this year, I was basically doing a video a day from the time I started. You know,
really?
when I started out, I would just upload at any time. You know, drop
Yep.
10 videos because they were finished. I was like, oh, you can schedule things. That's kind of cool. I think last year probably made me reconsider that heavily because I was away so much touring. That was kind of the first year post COVID that I spent a considerable chunk of time away from home. I think it was away from home for nearly 4 months between, you know, doing the Club Cabaret thing, and we did a festival in Melbourne with Ragdoll and a bunch of stuff here, and also did the Malmsteen tours. So yeah, I was just on tour a lot. But you know, the algorithm never stops. So it was like before every tour, I spent so much time scheduling videos that would come out while I was away. And then I'd be away, kind of like being like, cool, now I've got none of my stuff and I can't do any work with all this downtime.
Yep.
And then I'd be back home and yeah, it was just like not a very healthy balance, I think, to have. So at the start of this year, I was like, cool, I'm going to cut back and maybe do 3 or 4 videos a week.
Yep.
Which feels a lot more sustainable going forward. And I've
Yep.
been really lucky where, you know, I've seen, and also I made the decision where I was like, I want to do a bunch of guitar lessons again, because that's one thing that I love about YouTube. You can learn stuff easily on it.
Cool.
So I've been doing this like kind of 5-minute lick series, and so far they've been really, really well received. Like they've got kind of like 5 to 10 times the number of views they would normally get. I don't know if something's changed on the platform where they're valuing educational content more or something, but that's been nice seeing I'm probably getting roughly the same numbers as I was getting before. It's just like the individual videos are getting watched more, maybe because they're not competing against all the other videos I'm putting out.
Sure. And is that something you do? Do you analyze when you put stuff out and go, oh, that got a lot of views. What do I do there? Do that again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know,
Yep.
that's a totally natural thing. There's definitely something to be said of that. I am very aware that there's certain types of content which just perform better. And I kind of had this pact with myself where if I'm going to be doing this, and now it's at a stage where, yeah, it's actually, you know, I do earn a considerable part of my living through YouTube doing, you know, commissioned videos and the ad revenue. And then obviously people are aware of me, so they book lessons through it or they listen to the music. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm doing stuff that I hate in a public forum, just to have it as something that makes money. I still want it to be something that I'm passionate about, that I believe in, that, you know, hopefully contributes some way in a non-negative way on like people's well-being if they like guitar music. So yeah, I know that sounds very high-minded, but it's kind of like, yeah, you know, I could just make reaction videos, or like
Sure.
I could get on there and trash stuff, but that's not what I want to see.
Yep.
That's not what I'm into. I love music technology. I love gear. I love, you know, great playing, and, you know, I want to do my bit to promote that, and hopefully encourage people that, like, no matter what your circumstances are, you know, you can actually enjoy music. You can enjoy the guitar. You don't, just because I'm somebody who spends all day making YouTube videos and playing gigs and doing this kind of stuff, doesn't mean that like my experience with music or the instrument, it's like that doesn't really make me see any further than someone who comes home and plays for 30 minutes after work to unwind.
Yep.
It's taken me a long time to realize that it's like he who has the most fun wins when it comes to playing music. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know if you've sort of experienced that because, you were saying off air, you're back at uni studying, doing contempt music, right?
Yeah.
So, is that something, do you think you would have got the same experience out of it when you were younger than you would now?
Out of going to uni,
Yeah.
I said to you, I wish I'd done it a lot earlier. It's a
Yeah,
lot
right.
easier than I thought it was going to be. It's always a bit scared of music theory and all that, but now I could feel I could talk to piano players and so I play in a group called Absolutely 80s, which is the lead singers of a whole bunch of 80s bands in Australia here. And Wilbur Wilde plays saxophone in that. And
See, I didn't know this, Rick. That's amazing. Like
yeah,
Wilbur Wilde, Hey Hey It's Saturday was a bloody institution when I was a kid. And
absolutely.
hearing that guy rip sax
Oh,
like
dude.
every ad break, I would just used to be like, man, this is like the best thing ever.
Dude, I've got videos where he'll rock up to sound check, and then after he's got his bit all done, he'll just go lock himself in a room and just play until the show. And I'll be outside filming just a closed door, and it's that sound. We grew up listening to him just going, but I can actually have a conversation musically, deep musical conversation with him now, and understand what the fuck he's talking about when he starts talking about extended chords and things. And he said to me, he's always has been and always will be a student of music. He still practices a couple of hours a day in the basement of his apartments. He said, man, the car park downstairs has got the best reverb and the neighbors know it's just me. But yeah, so I play with the singers from Kids in the Kitchen, Uncanny X-Men, the Models,
Awesome.
Boom Crash Opera, Shantuzis, Real Life, Machinations, a few other, it's sort of a bit of a revolving thing. How did I get onto that? So I'm not playing that much. I'm only in their Queensland band. So when they come up this way, I'm doing that. Got burnt out playing the cover band thing. You set up in front of the TV screens and people are abusing you to get out of the way. I'm trying to watch the footy. It's like, just doing my job, mate. But yeah, I really should have done it years ago because it's not that hard to understand music. And now
it's a descriptive language for stuff that we already know and love, right?
That's exactly it.
It's just an overlay on top of, and I say that to so many people I teach where they're like, I think I want to do this. It's like, well, get them to play. A lot of them are already quite accomplished players. And you're like, dude, we're just going to be attaching a bunch of labels to things you can already do so that, and these are like universally agreed upon labeling systems. That's really all it is. And then you can go and, as you said, understand, the keyboard player will understand you or the sax player will understand you when you're in a situation where you've got to work something out. It won't just be like punching in the dark until something happens. So yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, when I left high school, I went to uni to do a maths degree because that was something that I was good at high school. And, I was still good at it at uni. I did quite well, but I was like 20, 21. And I was like, I think the one road I can see for this is becoming an academic. And all the academics that I know here, quite frustrated with the system that they're embedded in. Like they don't get to actually do what they love a lot. It's more about like, they have to go and teach or they have to get fund. They're in this constant cycle of trying to get funding. So what better system to go into than the music industry, I thought. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. If I describe what I do daily, it's like, probably music is a component of it, but it's a multimedia thing. But that's just the world we live in now, right? It's like my paternal grandfather was a fitter and turner, and he emigrated to Australia from Europe in the 60s. But like, that was just, hey, are you reasonably good with your hands? Here's a career for you, and you'll always be able to find a job in a factory. You'll always be able to find a job on a building site because you can do stuff. You can do like a bunch of the things. If
Yep.
you were like a landscaper, you have to know there's kind of a bunch of different disciplines involved in that. And yeah, certainly playing in a band isn't just about showing up and playing music, right? It's all the other stuff that happens around it.
Yeah.
Same as making YouTube videos. It's like you do have to get kind of intimately connected to how a bunch of the back end stuff works. And, it's I always encourage people. It's like they're new skills that you develop, and that helps you grow as a person. Being in that like growth mindset with everything you do, I think is quite healthy.
Yeah. People don't realize what goes into it, huh? Thumbnails, like that can
Oh,
make or
dude.
break a video, and people don't even think of that. I can spend hours just doing a freaking thumbnail, Um,
And thank the Lord for Canva automating all this stuff.
I don't,
Actually,
is that what you use, Canva?
I use Canva, but yeah, that was just something I fell into. But like obviously, if you're proficient with Photoshop or any of the other ways you can do this to generate thumbnails, super handy. But the person who started Canva is like, lived about 10 minutes from where I grew up in Perth, and
Oh,
they were
wow.
like, "Oh, why learn all this like Photoshop specific stuff when we can just have a drag and drop version?" And now they're like a billionaire. So, um, yeah, goes to show sometimes. But yeah, as you said, you know, it's not just like film, video, mix, audio, cool, profit. There is, you know, um, yeah, you kind of have to. There's this element of, because you're not just competing against like your other videos or other people doing similar stuff on YouTube. You're competing against like, you know, political news and, outrage culture and celebrity gossip, where like, given 5 videos, why is somebody going to click on my face going, when they could click on something about, a celebrity sex scandal? I know I would probably click on the celebrity sex scandal first. So
Sure, sure.
I totally understand it. But there's all these like, the thumbnail thing to me is a really interesting exercise in human psychology, because it comes down to basically, okay, the human eye is drawn to things that are in a certain position, and there's like a visual hierarchy. I remember learning this stuff when I was in like year 9 in art class, when I was
Yeah.
like, this is the lamest thing ever. Why am I learning this? And, 20 years later, I'm like, oh, hey, I remember. Yeah, if the text is yellow and it's got a drop shadow, people read it more.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing, little things that you learn in school that you wouldn't think, when am I ever going to use this? That, well, just simple things like I did journalism in high school, and just learnt basics of photography, the rule of thirds and things like that. And
Yeah.
um, also I did film and TV, and we had to learn how to thread a reel-to-reel machine. And then I got a job working in radio, and this is back when all the backing tracks for all the jingles that we'd make were all on reel
Oh,
to reel.
wow.
And I can
Yep.
remember the production manager on the first day saying, "Oh, and this is how you thread a reel." And I'm just like, "That's cool. I got this." He's like, "I thought you said you never worked in radio. How do you know to do that?" Showed me in high school. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, all these little things. Yeah, it's amazing how different life experiences can all come together, and you use them to do YouTube. And yeah.
I mean, it's the same as playing music, though, right? Like,
Mm,
for the show I'm playing at the moment, there's a lot of different musical styles presented, and like, I've never played jazz, right?
yep.
But I'm inherently have always been curious about music and music theory, and I've certainly listened to jazz, and I certainly find all the thing about extended chords and um, inside and outside playing like interesting on like an academic level.
Yeah.
I just never felt the need to want to, you know, go and perform music like that. But the show I'm doing, there's heaps of stuff where it's like a performer will be interacting with the audience and you have to underscore what they're doing. So it's kind of like a walking bass and swing drum kind of thing. And you've got to, play stuff that sounds like, hey, play some stuff that sounds like it's from the 50s, Um, and having that opportunity where you're like, oh, cool. I never thought I would enjoy playing this stuff. But actually, there's this like, I've read a lot of things and I've practiced some stuff. So now I actually get to use it in a musical context. And now I kind of like it, That's
Yeah.
that like, it's like trying a new food, right? If you just
Yeah.
look at it, you're like, oh, dude, that looks nasty. But if you go to your friend's house and their mum's cooked up some stuff and you're like, oh, dude, you got to like try this. You know, my mum cooked it or my dad cooked it. And you're like, yeah, all right. Oh, it's actually pretty good. What do you call this stuff? Then you're in, you know?
Yep. Yep. Hey, when it comes to the gear demos, have you ever had something come in that you were expecting to be really good and it just didn't live up to your expectations, and you're expected to do a really good job of presenting this thing and you're just like, oh, this guitar just won't stay in tune? Or have you had many of those?
Luckily, luckily not, but I certainly have had them. You know, I I'm in a very fortunate position where I've kind of had the opportunity to work with like all of my favorite brands.
Yep.
And it's almost like the bigger the brand, the cooler they've been about stuff, including feedback.
Yep.
And there's a really interesting thing I think with YouTube gear demos, right? Where a lot of the time you get sent stuff early because companies have figured out that if you drop a video on the launch day, it's more likely to be, you know, it's advertising, right?
Yep.
You have all your ducks in a row. So a lot of the time you get stuff early, and that normally flows one of two ways. Like, cool, you get something that might be a prototype and it might have some issues with it.
Yep.
But you're in a position where you can turn around and say, hey guys, this is stuffed, fix it, you know?
Yep.
And most of them want to have a successful product launch, so they'll do that. Or you've got you've got a sample size of one out of like a production run of like a few, right? So I just did a demo in the middle of last year with the new Fender Player 2s.
Yep.
And I was in Sydney at the time. They asked me to do it, and I was able to go into their offices, hang out a little bit, meet them. And they were like, cool, we're going to go out the back. We haven't even opened any of these yet. We're going to pull one. We'll pull the box out, you know, and then just pull it out and have a play on it and then take it away and, you know, do your thing.
Yeah.
So literally I opened the box, I pulled the guitar out of the box, I tuned it, and I had the camera on as well. So it was like, cool, I'll just play it. Came out of the box, perfectly set up. It was like everything about it was right, you know?
Yep.
I went and did a gig with it like 2 nights later. Sounded great, worked great, played the guitar a whole bunch. I was like, wow, this is really impressive. This is kind of straight out of the box. And I was able to capture a little bit of that. But with popular products, what I find is that most people don't really watch the video and then go, great, I'm going to go buy that thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to buy the thing anyway.
Sure.
They come back and watch the video because they want the gratification of knowing that they spent their money well,
Yep.
you know? So there's that sort of like, there's this unspoken relationship where it's like someone goes and buys something and they like it and they see that I like it, they're going to feel pretty good about it.
Yep.
But on the flip side, if they buy something expecting to like it and there's an issue with their instrument or their amp or something, they're well within their right to turn around and say, hey, Leon, you didn't mention this. You know, my guitar sucks.
Yeah. Right.
Does your guitar also suck and you're not being honest with it?
Yeah.
Or did they just give you a good one, or do you just have a good one? So yeah, stuff that's mass produced, it's really difficult. And there's a paradox of like why I say I don't do reviews. I do demos.
Sure.
You know?
Yep.
I get a thing and I play it. And that's
Yep.
basically, you can make up your mind whether you think that's cool or not. But I would need, like, if I'm going to review a Strat, I need like 30 of them and I need to play all of them from a production run. I need like a representative sample.
Yep.
Because quality control doesn't apply to a single thing. It's about the production run. Right?
Yep. Yeah. Would you ever, if somebody sent you something, well, he's gone again. That's okay. He will be back. He will be back. He will be back. Ling, 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 ling. There he is. And he's back.
Yeah. So yeah, in summary, yeah, it's hard to say anything about quality control when you've got a sample of one. I have had a few products that, you know, without naming names, where the original agreement was that, say, I would do a demo video of it, and I've run into issues with in one case with an acoustic guitar where it was just kind of like, I got it and I was like, okay, cool. This is cool for a cheap guitar. And then I looked up what the retail price was and I was like, whoa, this is actually not a cheap guitar. And, you know, at that price point, there's a lot of issues. So I kind of went back and forth with the manufacturer where I was like, hey, I don't think this is really up to snuff. I don't know if you've, you know, sent me a poor example or they're all like this kind of thing, you know. And I've just kind of basically sent them back and said, you know, either send me another example, and if it's still stuffed, then don't worry about it.
Yep.
Or just, again, because I'm demoing stuff, it's like there's the implicit relationship that it's like that it's something I would actually go and use.
Sure. Yep.
So yeah, there's been I mean, a small percentage in the, you know, I've done a few thousand videos now. But
that's a lot of videos.
It's a lot of, so it's a lot of my face on the internet, isn't it? So yeah, I've been pretty fortunate there. I have had a few smaller things like pedals and things like that have arrived and been defective.
Yep.
And in that case, you know, the manufacturers would just be like, "Hey, we'll send you another one to demo." And then I'll try and mention, yeah, they sent me one and it either got damaged in shipping, or, you know, keep in mind that this is like a fragile thing that you might not want to take on tour or stuff like that. So
yep.
yeah, it's the money is never good enough to lie to your audience. You know, if we were out here demoing stuff and making like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars per video, you could probably argue that there's a good incentive to stop. But when it's like, you know, 2-figure numbers that you make in ad revenue if you're lucky,
yep,
I really, you're far better off just telling it like it is. And I think there's a fine line between like telling it like it is and then overreacting as well, where it's like, it is unreasonable to expect that a $50 pedal that's mass produced is going to be as good as your like $900 Strymon or something.
Sure.
You factor that in. You know, there is a phrase like, you know, yeah, there's good, and there's also good at a price point. So yeah, it's again, if I really like, you know, a lot of the high-end tech channels where it's like, hey, you know, NVIDIA sent me their latest graphics card and paid us, and we're going to run it through our entire test studio and try to break it. That's super cool. But I don't think music gear there's just not the, like, economically, it doesn't work. It wouldn't make sense for Fender to send me a $4,000 guitar and pay me 10 grand to make a video where I basically drive a car over it. I wish we could. That'd be so awesome. And it would be so instructive. But yeah, you've got to sort of make do with what you got, which a lot of the time is like, hey, I'm going to demo something. But then also, if you see me playing it in 6 months, that's a pretty good indication that I actually really, really like it. Because there's so much, you know, it's a paradox. There's so much good gear, but then there's good gear that I personally use and would recommend to people. And there's stuff that I don't use that I still recommend to people, where I'm like, hey, you want to get into modeling? Probably get an HX Stomp, you know? I don't use one live. I use an FM3 because it's got a bunch of like advantages to it that I think is great. But the Stomp's also considerably cheaper. You can walk into any music store in the world and buy it. There's no wait list. You know, it's just like kind of as a the considerations as a consumer versus as like me making my weird original music and playing the gigs that I do that don't necessarily align. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, isn't there?
Absolutely, man. I'm aware that you've got a time limit. You've got some teaching to do this afternoon, so I'll round it up before too long. But just talking about cool guitars, I'm very jealous. You've got a Charles Cilia guitar, and Charles is my guy, man. My Charvel I sent to him to do a setup on when I got it back. I was doing some guitar tech work last weekend for Jack Jones and had to look after his 2 Charles Cilia's guitars, and I didn't know action could get that low and still be playable.
Yeah, it's kind of odd, isn't it? As Aussies, we're always expected that it's like, you know, that we're not, well, like Australia is obviously a great place to live. The people are amazing. Everyone around the world knows that. But you never think of Australia as being like a place that has state-of-the-art stuff until you play one of Charles's guitars and you're like, oh, okay, this is like, he's actually in that like conversation with your like your John Sir and your Tyler, and you know, it's perfect. Like I was in the, I'll drop some more names, right? I was on holiday in the States in September, October. Stayed with a good friend of mine, Michael Toran, who some of you may know is like got a collection of rack gear, and we went and hung out with Dave Friedman. And Dave basically has the twin to my guitar.
Yep.
And I was asking about it. And, Dave's so amazing at what he does. Dave has seen it all and heard it all. And, I feel like if you made something and Dave said it was fine, that would be pretty high praise. And his words about the guitar were, "It's perfect." He was like,
Yeah, right.
"I can't fault it. It's so well put together. It's everything about it is actually just perfect. Like the detail in like the inlays are so tight. I've never I've got some really nice PRS stuff, some really nice Hamer stuff. The stuff that Charles is doing is on another level. And I was able to go down to his workshop, and just an inspiring dude,
Nice guy, huh? He's always up for a chat. Yep.
Always up for a chat.
Yep. First time I met
Full of
Charles
knowledge.
was funny, man. I was at the Melbourne Guitar Show. It's a few years ago now, and I'd only sort of just started doing the YouTube thing. And I went to talk to, there was a pedal booth set up right beside his area. And I got looking at it, and I said to these guys, "Hey, if you want a demo, I've got just a small scale, channel." And he's asked me all the questions. "Oh, how many subscribers you got? Blah, 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 blah." And he just wasn't interested. And then I hear this, "Rick Hollis." I turn around, there's Charles. I'd never met him at that point, coming out with his hand outstretched going, "Dude, I watch you on YouTube all the time. Love your work." And all that. I'm just turning to these other guys that would just give me the cold shoulder and just like, and walked off. And he was just, I've been friends with Charles ever since, and he's always good for a chat. And I can't wait to get him to build me a custom Strat.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's builders who are really great at what they do, their stylistic niche. He lives in every niche. Like his jazz style guitars are amazing. I played one of his acoustic guitars that's it's actually an acoustic guitar that's intonated across the whole neck.
Wow.
It sounds incredible as well. Like his super strats that he's done, he's just like a man for all seasons, basically. So yeah, that guitar, he came and saw the show I'm playing when we were in Sydney.
Yep.
Well, I got in touch and was like, "Hey man, I'm in Sydney for like 9 weeks. It'd be great to hang out." So I went to the workshop, and he came and saw the show, and I was chatting to him, and I was like, "Oh, like, have you got anything in the showroom? Like, I'll play it. I'll play the guitar during the show, because that'd be, I know your stuff's amazing.
Yep.
It'd be kind of cool." Him and his wife came down. I'll do the thing, but one of your guitars will be up there. And I got him to refret my PRS DGT while I was there. And he was like, "Oh, hang on to it. Hang on to the Bell Aurora, until I do your guitar." I was like, "Okay, cool." Massive mistake, because, I played at the show. It was great. And I was like, "Man, this guitar's just like on another level." So I sort of mentioned offhand to him when I gave it back. I was like, "Yeah, if you ever sell it, just let me know." So ended up acquiring it, which I've been super stoked with. I've been playing it so much. And yeah, he's have you had him on the show?
No, I've been asking him for a while. The last conversation I had with him, he said, "Dude, can you help me get set up with lights and stuff?" Because I am getting a lot of requests, and I just don't want it to be dodgy. I want to set up everything properly and do it properly. And I said, "I can do that." And he said, I can be his first interview in the new setup. But I'm looking forward to having Charles on. Like I said, lovely dude. I knew his band Jerk back in the day. I was playing in another band that used to play around town with them. Hey, before I let you go, man, because I am keeping an eye on the clock, because you said you had to bail. Strings and picks.
Strings and picks. Good question. Picks are these. I've been using these Dunlop. What are they? 1.35, the white Tortex.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully everyone can see that. For, I don't know. I've been a Jazz 3 guy for a long time. When I started playing, I had the Dunlop big stubbies.
Yep.
And then, I tried like every Jazz 3, but I find they get slippery playing live. Whereas these Tortex ones, they don't slip as much. I drop them the least, which is probably why I'm drawn to them. And then pick strings. Been using Elixirs for a long time. They're like 10 to 52 nanowebs. But I've been using Stringjoy the last like 6 months or so, which I've really been into. They make a coated string, but just their standard, their regular like steel string set are amazing. Yeah. So I just 10 to 52s. They have like a slightly heavier B and a slightly lighter A string. So it's more of a balanced set.
Yep.
And yeah, I literally use the same gauge on like all my guitars and all tunings. So I'm not that fussy about it. But they're like, I don't know, they seem to, when you put a set of strings on, they take ages to like settle.
Yep.
They seem to settle pretty quickly, which I like.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I've had that experience. I used to play in a Queen tribute show,
Oh,
Killer Queen. That was fun touring around the globe dressed as Brian May. But
amazing.
I was using the gold strings that he uses, and I found that
Yeah,
they took
right.
a long time to settle in. Like I'd be stretching them before gigs and stuff, but that was the only drawback with those. Once they did stretch, they were great.
Yep.
Yeah. Man, I wish I had more time to talk to you. As I said, the
Oh, I
time
mean,
goes
I
really
can.
quick doing this.
I'm happy to stretch it for another 10 if you'll have me while the
Cool, man.
internet still works.
I've just scanning my way through some of the comments here to see, make sure I haven't missed any questions from anyone. I've tried to drop a few in as we're going. First song you learned. Yeah, we talked about that. First guitar hero. Who was your first guitar hero?
Oh, first guitar hero was probably, oh man, probably Scott Gorham from Thin Lizzy and Gary Moore, because
Sweet.
I was really into the Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous album as a kid, and the cover, and who's this like long haired guy with a sunburst Les Paul, and then I learned Gary also had played with Thin Lizzy and really got into his solo stuff, and probably those two, and maybe probably Richie Blackmore as well. They'd be like the first three.
Cool. Cool. Just scanning through some of the comments and stuff here. Brad's Guitar Garage. Now, I look
Hey,
at
Brad.
that. I don't know Brad, but Brad came up recently. I sold something.
Awesome channel.
I'll have to check it out. I sold something to somebody on behalf of a friend through Facebook, and it was an attenuator, and it blew up. And I thought, oh shit, I'm the man in the middle here. My mate's probably going to say, no, it worked when it left here. And the guy said, I'm going to take it down to Brad's Guitar Garage and get it fixed. And we ended up giving most of the money back to the guy, and he was really happy with the resolution.
Oh,
But it's funny to see Brad's Guitar Garage there because he just popped up in conversation.
would recommend. I feel like he'd be a cool dude to hang out with. Just like watching the videos that I've seen, it's like very similar. Like, just seems like he's someone with an actual sense of humor and also a mad skill set.
Cool. Yeah, he has dropped a couple of funny comments in there. Stuart Eddy says that Leon demoing Aussie guitar gear has always been a great thing, and I agree. My mate Dom.
That's also part of the mission on the channel as well. As like we're talking about Charles, but like Jason Headfirst Amps.
He was watching just before. I'm not sure if he's still there, but yep.
Anarchy Audio here in Perth. Electron Brothers. I just did some demo stuff for like Bondi FX. There's all these people who are Pirate MIDI. Those guys are Aussie based as well. They're doing some incredible stuff. So yeah, there's a pretty cool, niche market here in Australia that I think, the rest of the world should definitely know about.
Yeah, absolutely. So a friend of mine, Dominic Simeone, is asking, Leon, what do you use more often and what do you prefer when playing live? Your Axe Effects or tube amps?
Oh, definitely my Axe Effects. I haven't done a gig with a tube amp for, 12 months. I had to use a deluxe reverb for a gig, but I still ran my FM9 into it. But yeah, it's for what I do, the consistency and the control that I can get out of like a fractal is really, really something I just don't think I can live without. As much as I miss the sheer terror you can inflict on an audience with like a Marshall half stack, the trade-off, like I said, the consistency and the control is just like, unmatched. And being able to put like an FM3 in a backpack and fly with it is like when we did the Malmsteen tour, we didn't have a sound check. We were allowed to line check for like 2 minutes before they opened the doors.
Yeah.
And it was like literally play a couple of chords. So in that kind of context, literal lifesaver. And then the show I'm playing at the moment, it's I would need a lot. I would need a lot of gear to be able to do what I'm doing with a single FM9. Going from like a 20-second reverb with volume swell straight into like a Van Halen style dual delay, dual detune rhythm thing, straight into like a spring reverb and tremolo, like spaghetti western sound.
Yeah.
I used one preset for it. So yeah, it's
Cool.
it's an amazing time to be alive. Not that, and this is the best thing, right? One is no longer better than the other. It's like, if you can't live without your tube amp, just take it to the gig. If it's too loud, get an attenuator or something, and
Yeah.
then it'll still sound sick.
Yep.
Or use your modeler because it still sounds sick.
Yeah. 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 It's funny. I went to Red Hot Summer Tour last weekend, and
Awesome.
I spent most of the time right down the front. There was no shade anywhere though, so there was a couple of bands. I was like,
Living up to
not
the
so
name.
into years. Time to take a break from the sun. But I was going to ask you what it was like to play opening for Yngwie in front of a whole bunch of people standing there with their arms crossed. And the reason I brought up Red Hot Summer is I've known Dave Leslie very well for quite a few years. And whenever he sees me in the crowd, he always brings up, oh, there's this tall guy standing there with his arms folded watching everything I was playing. How was it playing for Yngwie, knowing that everybody there was a guitar player watching it going, I could do that?
Well, I mean, watching me play, I'm sure they could play the licks. I don't know if they could do the licks and the aerobics. That's why you come and see Ragdoll. But it was very funny you mentioned Dave, because at the Melbourne show, we finished up and, we were doing merch and stuff like that. And he comes up, he's like, oh, g'day, Leon, Dave. And I was like, oh my God, Dave Leslie, like the Dave Leslie, like, holy crap. And he was like, mate, that was awesome. So nice to finally get to see you guys to play. And I was like, what the fuck? Like what parallel universe am I living in where Dave Leslie is at a Malmsteen show telling me I did, okay. Honestly, probably the easiest support thing I've done from the perspective of, it's like, it's because it's like, okay, it's like going in like a big dick competition with the man with the world's biggest dick. Like, you just know you're not winning that competition. So you also have nothing to lose, because Malmsteen's going to come out and do Malmsteen, and it's going to be Malmsteen, know? And I'm sure half the crowd was there because they love him, and half the crowd was there probably because they absolutely despise him so much that they just had to buy tickets and go see him. And he like intimately understands that so well. He wouldn't have had the career he's had without it. So yeah, surprisingly, I felt like the least pressure I felt for any gig, because I just had to go out and play songs that I have been playing for 15 years that I love playing, and most people probably went into that to see Malmsteen. They didn't come to see us. But if one person walked out of there and went, oh, gee, they were pretty cool songs, and those guys certainly have a lot of fun on stage, it was more, I think the way I approach it, which is the way I approach every gig, is like, I am going to be the one having the best time. That's just the little marker that I'm going to lay down. No matter what. I don't care if everyone else has a shit time. I'm going to go out and have a great time.
Cool.
And I find that attitude generally most people, especially Aussies, are into as well, because they're like, oh, he's not taking it seriously. We don't have to. So yeah, it was, I mean, Yngwie does Yngwie's thing, and I totally, like, I love his playing, and absolutely respect that, he lives in his little bubble and does his thing. So it was just a like nothing to lose situation, because one, I got to see one of my favorite artists up close, and two, I got to go and play guitar music for a bunch of guitar players. And most of us are that person, with the arms folded.
Yeah.
But also most of us are like, hey man, like, good on you for getting up there and doing it. That's the funny thing about Australia,
Yeah.
We'll cut people down, but not too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got to add, I said my friend Dom's watching. When I was at Red Hot Summer, Dave does a version of Hendrix's Fire in the Baby Animal set. And there's a bit where Jimi Hendrix says, move over, Rover, let Jimmy take over. And I was there with my girlfriend right down the front, and Dave goes over the mic, move over, Rover, and let Ricky Hollis take over. And name
Oh
drops me.
man.
And my girlfriend just looked at me like, what the fuck? It's like, yeah, I've known him for a while. And my
Yeah,
friend
good
Dom
dude.
happened to film that from up the back, and I posted it on Facebook. It was just like, cool moment there. Hey,
Man, that's the cool thing about Aussies as well, is like, like fundamentally, most of us get in like any situation like that, and we're like, how can I find a way to just like, like do a bit with one of my mates?
yeah,
It's always
yeah,
just like, never take things too seriously.
yeah, yeah. No, I thought that was awesome when he did that. And I texted him afterwards, man. Thanks so much, mate. That made my day with that. He's like, oh, I had to
Oh,
name drop you
incredible.
there. Yeah. Hey, two more questions here. One from Michael Torrin. Now, you mentioned Michael before, didn't you?
Hey, the good man, Michael Toran. Yeah.
Yeah. He says,
He would be
Leon, you.
someone very interesting to have on your show if you
Oh,
like
cool.
gear.
Well, he's saying that you are an inspiring dude, but then he also says Filtertrons or P90s.
Oh, now here we go. I reckon in a year you could ask me the same question. I have a different answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I've absolutely been on this like semi hollow body kick that Michael knows well about, and he kind
Yeah.
of inducted me into the Filtertron thing when I was hanging out with him. So I would still probably reach for a guitar with P90s to do what I want to do
Yep.
most of the time over Filtertrons. But again, I'm in one of those, like, I'm so curious about them and what you can do. And like, just listening to lots of the Cult recently as well. And like the sounds Billy Duffy gets out of like, his Gretsch guitars are like, it's a thing, right? And it's a
Yeah.
thing that I don't really have in the lineup at the moment.
Yep.
It's like the other part of guitar sounds where, so many, I mean, also Malcolm Young, right? Like, to me, like the greatest rock guitar sounds are Gretsch and a Gibson, locked together. So yeah, at the moment, P90s. I've got a Les Paul Custom with P90s that I actually took out and did a gig with for like the first time in 10 years, and it sounded so good. It's just a little bit noisy. But
Yep.
yeah, I need to get something with Trons.
Question that I can think of for myself is, when you're using your Axe effects, is there a particular model that you gravitate towards?
Yeah, so I think kind of the way I treat the Axe effects isn't as a like every possible other guitar player's sound under the sun, which it can do. It's more like a thing where it actually, for me, it feels like an extension of what I like in terms of just guitar sounds. So for a long time I was using one of the Mark series amps in there.
Oh, yeah.
Big fan of that sound, and I own a real Mark IV, but I've been using, so they have models of like all the 5150 variations, right?
Yep.
And the first year I went to the States, I bought like a little 6505 1x12 combo because it was cheap. And, I was like playing a Soldano a lot at the time. And I was like, yeah, Eddie had a Soldano and then designed the 5150 with James Brown. So same diff. Love that little amp. Did so many shows with it. So there's a model of the 5153 Stealth amp in the Fractal now. But then there's also like they have like one of their custom variations where it's like, an idealized version of it. I think there's probably some funky values in the real amp that, probably make it a bit noisy and give it way more gain. So they've tweaked those. So I use that like Fractal Stealth model in there. And it's cool that it's not a real world amp, right? But,
Yep.
For me, the recipe is always like high gain amp with not much gain on the amp, pre-boost, cutting some low end and boosting a bit of mids, and then, crank up like the depth and presence control so you get that big scoopy thing. I use one of my own custom IRs of a cab that I used to gig with that anyone can download for use on any device. And yeah, it's like a little bit of reverb, a little bit of pitch detune, and then like a stereo delay for leads and a wah. It's what, again, it's kind of what I was using before I went digital, but just I've got the flexibility to like, if I want a stereo delay, I'd click one button and now it's stereo. Sick.
Once you go stereo, there's no going back, huh?
Oh, exactly, man. Exactly. You know how it is.
Yeah, yeah. I've been playing stereo since the 90s when I had an ADA and a Quadriverb and a Carver stereo power amp, two Marshall valve state quads. And I got to remember, it's only Australia that says quad box, and I always have to
Yes.
remember not to
Yeah,
say quad
yeah.
box. Yeah, you know that, right? People have
Yeah,
pulled you
yeah,
up on that.
absolutely.
Yeah, 4 by
Like quad
12.
box? 4 by
Yeah,
12? No, quad box. Quad box sounds way cooler. This needs to
it
be
does. It does. Yeah, it was when I had Thomas Blug on that he said, "Oh, there's this crazy word that you guys say for a 4 by 12." I mean, like a quad box. Because yeah, that word. Oh,
oh, it'd be I should do a video about Aussie gear slang because there's a few other things,
there
right?
is. Yeah, mesa, not mesa. We say
Yep.
fold back. The rest of the world says monitor.
Yep.
Um, what is it? Punters gets dropped a lot.
Yep.
Do this one for the punters. Everyone's like, who? What?
Uh,
Yeah, a few things like
yeah,
that.
someone left a comment today this morning I was reading through and I was talking about a dual delay, and this person thought I was saying jewel like a Jewel. He's
Yep.
like, where do I find this dual delay? It's not on the list. And I was like, no, Dual, Sorry. Half of one side of my family were, Irish immigrants who moved here 150 years ago, and probably stuck in the blood somewhere. So,
Well,
yeah,
neither of us are the typical Aussie that talks like this. You know, how you get the guys that really talk like this, and then the other people would really have a hard time trying to understand us.
oh yeah. So my wife, who's American, was we were staying with a friend. Actually staying at his folks' place, who are both Irish, and like her, my friend's dad has a very thick Irish accent, so she was stuck between the two of us with Aussie accents and him with a very thick Irish accent. She was like, "It's the only time I've lived here where my brain actually melted, and I really couldn't understand what either of you were saying. I just couldn't." Like it was bouncing around so much. So yeah, it's and also like WA is funny where you know, I get it a lot from my mates on the East Coast. Like, you guys sound so posh. I was like, no, we don't. We sound rough as guts. And they're
No,
like, no,
no, there
there's
is a
certain things you
poshness.
say. Yeah,
There is a
I think it's
poshness.
just, I think it's just a cadence thing, and also, there's, I, I feel like the last census, it was like there's a majority, like the highest percentage of, if you look at where people's parents are from,
Yep.
that it's like actually the UK, it's something like 25 or 26% of people who live in WA, their parents were born in the UK versus, and that's higher than any other, including both parents being born in Australia, which is a very good indication, I think, of like the paradox of being an Aussie where,
Yeah.
so much of like Australian identity is actually rooted in, it's this like mishmash of every other culture over the world.
Absolutely. So you're talking about the posh thing. It's Michael Hutchence from Perth. He was, wasn't he?
I think so.
Yeah, because there's a poshness about the way he talks. The only other place that I can pick an accent is South Australia, and it's just one particular thing they say. Instead of shower and hour, they say shower and hour, just as one.
And they say Q instead of cool.
Oh, I haven't noticed that one. I'll have to. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's the one other place that I can pick someone straight away and go, "Oh, you're from Perth. Oh, so you're from Adelaide. How do you know your accent?"
So Michael Hutchence, in fact, was he was born in Sydney. English parents, English grandparents, but then moved to Brisbane. Wow, but this is crazy. I didn't know any of this about Michael Hutchence. Lived in Hong Kong for a short time. Yeah, so got all around. But I swear In Excess had something to do with Perth, right?
I thought In Excess were a Perth band. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe maybe it's like a then again, I mean, if you wanted to fall off the map, anytime before the 90s, you just moved to Perth, right?
I got to say, I've been over there a couple of times touring with the Queen show when I was in it, and I loved the city. I thought it was a really nice city.
Yeah. Perth's got a lot going for it, man. When's the last time you were here?
Oh, man, I quit that band probably about 10 years ago now. So, yeah, probably about 10 years. Yeah.
It has actually changed a lot in maybe the last 7 or 8 years. Like they've changed, the city center as well, and also the suburbs have just kind of boomed, so
Sure.
to answer your question, the parents of the Farris boys were the Farrises grew up in
Okay,
Perth.
sure.
Yeah.
So whenever I've done the
connection.
Perth run, we've always done, like 3 or 4 nights. I forget the name of all the different places that you can do the run there. But the Charles Hotel,
Oh, yeah.
that's a kick-ass rock venue.
Isn't it just like something out of the 70s?
Yeah.
Like time stopped, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I had some awesome shows there, man.
Yeah, man, it always goes off. We've played there a few times. Ryan, our singer, does a Creedence tribute band, and they play the Charles like a couple of times a year, and it's always like wall to wall people crammed in there, you know, hot and sweaty and great sounding room. Just that, like, it's still the old school Aussie pub experience, right?
Absolutely.
It's a great one.
Yeah. Dude, I'm just seeing the time. I know you got some teaching to do, so I better let you go.
Yep.
Been awesome chatting to you, bro.
Likewise.
I'm sure we'll bump into each other along the way, guitar shows or something. So don't be a stranger, mate. Come and say hello if we do see you.
Absolutely. Likewise, mate. Thanks for having me, and to everybody who tuned into the live stream. This was a pleasure.
I've got my audience over here, and they're all very appreciative as well. So thanks to Leon. And looking at my controller, which is the button I hit to close all this one right here. Thanks, people. Ciao.